friends. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers, back for another episode of Shaping Vaping with Joe Gitchell from Pinion Associates, who is fresh back from the beautiful state of Illinois, where he was at the National Conference on Tobacco or Health. And so we're going to talk about that and a few other developments in vape world, including some rollicking developments at CDC, along with their, chronic intransigence on messaging. And we also want to talk about the developments in disposables, some new disposable products on the market that came from two companies that have long declared they hate disposables. So we'll kick into that, and want to find some time to close too with an incredible new Substack from Joe's colleague Ariel Celia, which is making a very big splash in the field of nicotine science and policy. Joe, tanned, rested, and ready, back from the People's Republic of Chicago.
Hey, Chicago is wonderful. I haven't been downtown for a while. I did have some deja vu as the 2016 Society for Research on Nicotine and Tobacco annual conference was at the same hotel, the Sheraton. And just to throw back to that, Professor Anne McNeil of King's College London in that 2016 meeting gave the best plenary talk I think I've ever seen. They did not record it, but it is, well, it's 2016. They would have had to use camcorders or, some, I don't know. It's too bad. I think I probably have her slides. The title was "A Failure of Mission, Not Differentiating Tobacco from Nicotine." And it was really strong. And she closed with the clip from, I believe, Goldfinger, where James Bond, Sean Connery asks, "May I smoke?" And Blofeld says, "Give him a cigarette. It won't be the nicotine that kills you, Mr. Bond."
I'd forgotten about that. Well, that's you're touching on one of my great pet peeves, which is all these conferences with incredible speakers and, highly informative data and, compelling presentations. And yet, inexplicably, these conferences do not stream them. And when the videos do come up, it's weeks or months later. Now, you've argued, I think, persuasively that, they need to sell tickets. Okay, I get it. But the conference is over. Put the content online, for crying out Christmas. I mean, it's like, as a publicist, it just is like, it's like watching someone pour champagne down the gutter. What explains that?
No, I share your, I don't know, but I agree with you. And I would hope the conference, this one just this past week, I hope they do make the content available, and I expect they will. And just to the conference's credit, they allowed me as a consultant to Juul Labs to register and attend, and there was no, many of the conferences include an affirmation that you have no ties to the commercial tobacco or nicotine industries, as those people are prevented from attending. So I'm not sure that there was anyone else there that had that disclosure. I did, as I registered, I tried to put in, even though they didn't have a clear spot, if memory serves, for such disclosures, I put in, like, my name. I consult for Juul Labs. And their last question in the registration was, we want this to be a positive experience for you. Is there anything you need for the conference? And I said, well, as a consultant for Juul Labs, just the ability to attend would be wonderful. So, but Chicago's awesome.
You're reminding me of the great Bobby Jones quote when he called a penalty on himself, and then afterward the reporters tried to congratulate him, and he said, "You might as well thank me for not robbing a bank." Joe, they don't deserve credit for including you. I mean, are you absolutely kidding me? That's the right thing to do.
I'm not absolutely kidding you. In our polarized, divided world, it's these little things matter. So they do get credit And yes, we can aspire to the Bobby Jones commitment to the rule of rules.
Well, when I come to your house for dinner one night, I'll expect you to thank me for not showing up drunk. Give me full credit for not showing up wasted.
That is, if you do. If you do
I never get
show up
invited.
sober.
If I ever get invited, it's a much higher bar than the nicotine conferences. All right. Well, I mean, so it sounds to me like you were in a very, very distinct minority there. I mean, I followed it. I followed the conference a little bit on Twitter, and it looked like a rogues gallery of prohibition enthusiasts to me.
So I'm gonna, in my commitment to discomfort of thought, you're right. It from a kind of just ultra social primate perspective, I didn't know that many people. I knew some people, and people were friendly and happy to chat. The content from the podiums was very much through the lens of the mainstream of tobacco control in the U.S. in 2025.
Well, help me understand. There was a key one that we should zero in on, I think, for example, that got a lot of traction in vape world, which was the one little truncated quote from Brian King, in which he said something like, at a time when public health is under so much pressure, we have a duty to ourselves and history to fight like hell. Can you give me a little more context around that? Was he talking about public health writ large, or tobacco control needs to fight like hell?
Oh, he was, I think, speaking to both of those notions. And I think it is, we will probably have differing views on this, but certainly this is a community both specific to tobacco control and broadly within public health that feels very much under siege, and for good reason.
We'll talk. I want to touch on that in depth in a minute. But again, let me just put a fine point on it here. Brian King wants to fight like hell for what? I mean, I guess it's good to know he finally feels that way and is letting his true attitude, be presented. But it sounds an awful lot like he means fight like hell for tobacco-free kids agenda. Am I misinterpreting it?
I don't think so. I think he has always been a very effective communicator in support of the positions that he's trying to advance. His boss, Yolanda Richardson, also gave an address the next day, which was very much in a similar frame. And I do want to, let me just take a step back to give you the way I'm trying to process the input from this week. Sure. I'm really consolidating around this belief that groupthink is the root cause problem. And we need to understand that there's no vaccine or natural immunity to groupthink. We're all susceptible to it. And it's easy to argue against groupthink when you're outside the dominant groupthink. And that's the kind of the position that we advocates for continuum of risk and nicotine without smoke and harm reduction are in. And now the folks who have been in the mainstream for a long time are finding that they are under pressure with the power of the state behind it. And it's a pretty daunting place. But the fundamental viewpoint of at least the gestalt in that room was not a how do we help people who smoke live longer lives, so they would all certainly agree with it, but it was overwhelmingly the struggle with a insidious industry, and that is the clear kind of framing or framework.
Well, I thought a lot about. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Finish
No. I'll stop.
Well, I thought a lot about that. You and Greg Conley and I had a little bit of a colloquy on Twitter in the last couple of days about this, and I continue to think, Joe, if you'll indulge me, I think you're making a kind of category error here, because what you're talking about is what's motivating these folks, and the category that I like to focus on is what are the consequences of their action? What is the outcome of that? And I mean, I'll give you a colloquial example to illustrate it. Do you remember some years ago when Comedy Central did those interviews with the great rock singer Rick James, author of the song Super Freak. Did you ever watch those?
I,
They would
I did not, but sounds like I need to.
they would do these skits. I'll send you the link. We'll put the link in the chat. They did these skits in which they recounted some of his, zany antics at parties and nightlife and all the hellbent conduct that he would get into. And then they would interview Rick James to, explain his side of the story. And one of his great sayings, which became a catchphrase, was "Cocaine's a hell of a drug." And the reason that's funny is because, yes, when you're taking a lot of cocaine, you're going to do crazy, hellbent, impulsive things that cross all kinds of moral boundaries. But the reason it's funny is because, yes, that's what motivates it. But that doesn't, it's hilarious because it doesn't excuse you from the moral consequences of your actions. Like Rick James is offering that up as if, oh, well, I'm absolved. And the audience laughs because, of course, you're not absolved. You're responsible for all those things you do, no matter what blinkers or urges or groupthink or whatever motivated you. I mean, it's interesting in a Jungian psychological sense, I suppose, but it is distinct from the outcome. And, that's what continues to bother me so much about this, is that these folks, whatever North Star they're following or Kool-Aid they drank or whatever's motivating them, at the end of the day, it's interesting, but I don't care. Like it's the outcome of their actions that matters for ordinary people outside that room.
So I'm not sure I've ever been accused of making a category error before. But it's not, if my hashtag make new mistakes ever really takes off, I'll get to add this to the list.
Trying to put it gently. I mean, I know
No, but I guess so. I've also been, the field of smoking control, then tobacco control, really, in the wake of the 62 Royal College of Physicians report, the 64 Surgeon General's report, there was this clarity when cigarettes were the dominant delivery form and an industry that only sold cigarettes, this scream test frame that anything that the industry likes is bad and anything that the industry hates is good, that I think became the foundational heuristic for this field. And I think they have resisted the new reality that there are now this wide range of products across the continuum of risk. And that really complicates that story. But my own belief is they have created a groupthink capacity to resist a lot of that challenge. And that can be very persistent. So and we're not going to agree on this. I don't think there's anything unique or special about these people in terms of their ideological framework. We're all vulnerable to these things. And this was a time and in a period of threat, with fear being a big part of it, that focusing on motivation and less on what is the outcome is perhaps the only kind of framing of messages that they were comfortable pursuing. But and I agree with you. I think, one part of Yolanda Richardson's talk was, don't forget we're winning. And I really wanted to have the discussion of, can we talk about what this winning looks like? And how would we know if we got there? Their overriding goal, obviously, is to end the sale of all commercial tobacco and nicotine products. And there's no room in that for continuum of risk as a regulatory or policy tool. All of these products must be stopped. And I disagree with that as a valid or as a constructive goal. And I'd love to get into the discussion of, so what are the trade-offs that are implicit with that you're not being explicit about? That is a goal, and you may actually achieve it. Is it as doable and over what time frame as ending the sale of combustible tobacco products, which is inherent within the 2017 FDA comprehensive plan? but allowing the regulated sale of non-combustible products. And that would be a useful discussion. There was not a lot of space being held for that discourse, certainly during the public portions of the meeting, though I talked to many people to try to have that. And, I didn't quite get the, read the room more on, but because mostly people are more polite.
Well, I'm sure
And that's what they were
they
thinking.
just, I mean, I imagine they just discount everything you say because you're,
No, well, not so I would say I did not do a great job of making new friends. There were lots of people there who I knew from when I was less disreputable, and either they're willing to give me credit from the past, but I think so that was if I could do it over again, I probably would have tried harder to meet new people. But I think you're right. Many of the new people meeting me for the first time without my without having an existing relationship, I think they would have said, "Oh, I think I've heard enough from you already with your disclosure. Thank you."
well, let me say a word of praise for you, Joe. I mean, I myself would have been kicked out of that gathering within 5 to 7 minutes, I'm sure. But you are a open-minded, highly credentialed, deeply thoughtful, engaging person who has devoted a career to thinking about these issues. And if I had to pick one person out of central casting to be a diplomat to that kind of crowd, it would be you. So,
Well, thank you. That's kind. I will say, as much as I try to, express those as goals and try to walk that talk, it is hard. And mostly what goes through my head is how hard is that for the people on the other side to do? As hard as it is for me, and as much as I put that out as that's what I'm trying to do, it is a big ask for someone who's fully in that community to say, "Oh, well, I wonder what things I deeply believe in I'm wrong."
well,
And
let's loop back to where we started on this, because maybe we can find an answer. Back when he was the head of Center for Tobacco Products, Brian King came on this very show and said that vaping as a general class is much safer than cigarettes and helps people quit. Now, as you point out, he says we're going to fight like hell for the TFK agenda, which is to eradicate all nicotine products. So did he have a conversion, or was he being dishonest earlier?
I think, and obviously he's very capable of speaking for himself. I'm not sure if he's would be game to come back on. But
You've spent a lot of time thinking about the motivations. Like, give me your best hunch.
I think he firmly believes that he's contributing in the most effective way that he can to reduce overall death and disease. And that the trade-off of accepting the rejection of the continuum of risk, which is essentially the current TFK position, is a trade-off he's prepared to make in this meanwhile. I don't know that that's so that's my sense.
Well, I'll give you my
And
sense.
I would love to imagine that, and it's not something that happens quickly, but over time that we will see at least some of these organizations move in that direction.
Well, that gets back to one of our standing wagers from earlier in the year on our podcast, which is whether Brian King will ever utter anything that is pro THR, or that more such products should be regulated. And if I'm stating it right, but whether
you're saying in his current role,
yeah, that's
because
right.
obviously I think he could rightly say, and we would provide constructive criticism of how much more he could have done, but he's published, he's presented, he advanced the continuum of risk in his role at FDA CTP,
and he published in some journals along those lines too. Well, I mean, That's my question. He is capable of speaking for himself. He does have a role there. Let's hear it. Which is it? These products have a role, or we should fight like hell to eradicate them. You can't reconcile those two views.
And I'm gonna, and this is a cop out. I accept that this is a longer game than he's been in role for 8 weeks now or something. And again, that I sound like an apologist, but I I don't believe his understanding of the science around these products has changed. Maybe that's a fair way to say it. He's in an advocacy role now, not in a scientific regulatory role.
All right. Well, I'll put it a different way. He owes the public an explanation, and I sure hope we get one soon. And we'll see. If he comes out and says they have a role publicly, I will gladly. I got my bottle of whiskey sitting right back here on the bar cart, which I will have sent overnight to Montgomery County. Why don't we move on, Joe? Let's see. I also wanted to talk about what's going on at the Centers for Disease Control. There was a very interesting development just a few days ago, and again, correct me if I'm misstating this. I know you've focused on it closer than I have, but they discontinued one of their ad campaigns, which is, I believe, called "Tips from Former Smokers," and our friend Cliff Douglas, eminent thinker in our space, pointed it out and tweeted that, in his view, that ad campaign had done, a world of good and had helped many people quit smoking. He said, and that he was sorry to see the program go. And then some other vape advocates in that thread, which we'll put in the chat. Some other vape advocates pointed out to him that a lot of those ads in that campaign were pretty dishonest. And Cliff and they screenshotted some of them. Basically, the ads that were pointed out were implying that vaping will cause lung collapse, which again is not true. CDC and Cliff acknowledged that and said, yes, that's an unfortunate blemish on this otherwise good campaign, and they need to do a better job of messaging. I wish they would, try to improve the way they talk about it. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that was the gist of it. And I don't know. I know you were struck at Cliff's openness about that. I mean, I've got a thought or two, but give me your impressions of that, and especially the end of the campaign. What's your view on that?
So I think tips from former smokers and paid media to encourage people who smoke to stop is a good idea. I would agree that the way that it's been executed could have been much more effective if it embraced the continuum of risk, educated more on the difference between nicotine without smoke and nicotine in smoke, and address those misperceptions. So what I would have wished for was a continued campaign that actually gave more of the public useful information that they could use, rather than canceling as a whole. So, is it a glass 58% full or 48% full? I would have rather had it be continued and expanded and enhanced, as opposed to spiked completely.
Well, I'll give you. I mean, I know I love nothing more on our podcast, Joe, than pushing my own buttons. But I'll give you a longtime complaint of mine about this, which is that those ad campaigns never get any serious scrutiny from the press. I mean, there are entire publications like Advertising Age magazine and entire beats at publications like the Wall Street Journal that do nothing but report on the efficacy and reach and creativity, all the aspects of particular ad campaigns. I mean, a new ad campaign rolls out for Snickers, and you can expect a 1,500 word deep dive in the Wall Street Journal about whether it's, reaching people with the chocolatey goodness. But here, these ad campaigns, which are gigantic in scope, the budget for these campaigns is eye-watering. And it's on a crucial issue. It's not about eating a Snickers bar or whether or not you're going to get when the McRib sandwich is coming back. It's about life and death. And yet there is never, ever any coverage of it. And a really good parallel to this is the anti-drug campaign that the federal government rolled out back in the 90s. And it was later shown by your good colleagues in the world of academia that the campaign not only didn't work, but actually caused more underage people to use drugs. Now that came out like 10 years after, and people in my space of drug decriminalization and harm reduction were have long lamented, like, where was the press? Where was the New York Times when the actual harm was happening? Where were the watchdogs when this was going on? And the same thing's happening now. Like, where? I mean, I could not count the yards and yards of press coverage about CDC's, resignations happening right now. They've got acres of space in the newspaper, about the lamentations of CDC officials, but there's not a syllable for whether one of these gigantic 9-figure advertising campaigns is working, doing more harm than good, involves trade-offs, is a responsible use of public monies. I mean, nothing.
Well, I mean, that's not. There has been evaluation of these campaigns. That's a big part of the packaging and positioning of the benefits that they.
You're making a great point. This is right. The government itself does an evaluation of the efficacy of those campaigns. That's right.
But if your point is it's the student grading their own homework, but my client conducts its own research to submit to FDA, right? And I wouldn't want that to be challenged just on the basis of its provenance. How is that any different?
No, it should be challenged on its empirical accuracy.
So agreed. So, but that's not the criticism you were making. You were saying the government funded its own evaluation.
No, my complaint is not with the evaluation. My complaint is that no scrutiny is ever applied to that evaluation by the press. No one ever stops to ask, is the government telling us the truth?
Well, so that lets me ping on my groupthink is the problem again. Everybody that's in symbolic capitalism, to quote, to use Musa Al-Gharbi's term.
I'm scared to even ask what that means.
But because of polarization and those sorts of things, all of these people already know everything they need to know about this topic. Tobacco is bad, smoking is bad, nicotine is bad, the industry involved can't be trusted, and folks need to put their faith in these institutions like health voluntaries and the CDC. And
well, they do. Yeah, I mean, CDC plays an important role, and that's their duty. I mean, I myself, have a radical view on what should be done with that agency, but most Americans, you're right, rely on it and count on it, which I think is all the more reason why their accuracy and effectiveness ought to be, tested and held to the highest standards. But a good example of that, Joe, is in another topic that you and Greg and I kicked around in recent days on Twitter, which is their messaging. It's not just the quitting cigarettes, it's their messaging on EVALI and how they wrongly and falsely connected that lung injury outbreak with nicotine vaping. That has been authoritatively, exhaustively, and expertly refuted. There's zero connection with nicotine vaping. And yet, incredibly, to this day, on its website, CDC has guidance for the public and for medical doctors telling them, oh, if you have patients with EVALI, the first thing you got to do is get them to stop using nicotine vaping. I mean, it's incredible. That is an ongoing, active public deceit that, to my mind, it completely implodes any benefit of the doubt or credibility that agency deserves. They're actively lying to the public.
So I've made a note to include Mark Gunther's summary on CDC's EVALI screw up, which I think is the best single treatment of this question. I agree with you. It is a blemish. It is embarrassing. And I am on a quest to try to convince enough people that the way to earn back trust, or the way to gain back trust, is to earn it and start behaving in more trustworthy ways. And a very trust boosting step is to acknowledge mistakes and correct them. And I'm not aware of a better topic in the public health space for CDC to correct and update than their overall approach to relative risk and EVALI in particular.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
continue to fail at that, like I do almost everything. So there we
well,
go.
no, I'm gonna benefit from it, Joe, because I'm gonna take some of those crib notes from my other clients when I do, as you know, crisis management for a lot of very large industrial companies. So the next time we have an industrial accident or a product recall, or the SEC comes knocking at our door about executive compensation, I'm gonna say, guys, it's a blemish, and we're trying to get better. What counts is what's going on in our heart. Forget about what we actually did. It's really, we're walking toward the sun. So I'm glad you're going to work with us while we improve each and every day. Joe, we will be crucified on Fifth Avenue if I attempted to put that in a press release. So I don't know. I'll end my lament by saying I sure do wish that these journalists would apply, they use the standards they apply to my clientele in the business world and would apply that to the government on whom we all trust for, safety and in this case, life or death decisions. But what's really interesting about the CDC too is there was a story this week, Joe, that we tweeted about. You may have seen, for the first time that I've seen anyway, Fox News did a full-length segment about safer nicotine products. And it aired throughout the day on Wednesday on all of their major programs, which have the biggest audience in cable news. And it started with Secretary Kennedy saying explicitly that pouches are the safest way to consume nicotine and vaping is second. And what we really want to do is get people off of smoking cigarettes, which is great and is accurate. And, despite a lot of the other views that he has on other topics, which I would say are much more dubious or unreliable, that one is true. And incredibly, Fox then said, but the medical community is not on board. And they quoted CDC, which is, again, subordinate to Secretary Kennedy. It's within he's the boss, their boss. And they said, oh, no nicotine product is safe, including vaping and pouches. And so I guess the point I'm making is as we talked about in the last episode with Dr. McCary at FDA and Secretary Kennedy, there seems to be a real fracture in these public health agencies about the core question. And I have to say, I can't recall the last time that a subordinate agency division contradicted the head of a department in that fashion. And I wonder if you were struck by that too.
So I think I may have been multitasking watching that segment. Was that like Brett Baer was like the
yes? Well, it aired
had
on
a correspondent who led it.
The correspondent was Griff Jenkins, one of their national
throughout the day. So it would have been.
It was on their morning show, the noon shows, and on Special Report, which is I think their first or second highest rated show.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can't resist noting that it's not really fair to blame CDC for not having current and updated information on these questions, since one of the acts of this administration was to eliminate the Office on Smoking and Health. So literally, there's nobody home that would be responsible. Now, whether they would be willing to update their thinking to reflect the secretary's point of view, that's a different question. But we don't even get to ask that because those folks were, forcibly exited this spring.
Along with a lot of others. I mean, there was a Valentine's Day massacre at CDC. That, what was it? 4 top officials that were leaders of the agency all walked out the door to the raucous applause of their colleagues. I hasten to add.
Well, so I mean, I don't know where our agreement level falls on this. I am a believer in having trustworthy state capacity to deal with collective action problems in public health. There are a lot of public health challenges that have been largely resolved thanks to expert-led population-wide efforts, from sanitation to food safety, things that we just simply take for granted. Um, and I, big picture, I'm very concerned about the consequences of this sort of um, uh, removal of senior leadership who, while imperfect, and is they have their groupthink, the substitution with a different groupthink is unlikely to yield good outcomes. What we need is the viewpoint diversity, the Jonathan Rausch sort of stuff that actually gets us to reliable knowledge generation. And we're not going to get that by removing people who, while may have the have the burden of operating within a group that has an identity and strong beliefs, not all of which are tethered to reality, removing those people and substituting them with a different group is not going to uh, end up helping us. So that's my concern.
I share a lot of those. I share a lot of those concerns, and I would plead with you to, try to see that the reason that's unfolding in that way, and the reason that there's been such a lurch in the other direction, and yes, one that indulges a lot of, beliefs and individuals that are dubious to say the least, is because the public health leadership that you're referring to has drifted over the line from persuasion and public messaging and, yes, honesty, into coercion and deceit. And there is an enormous reservoir of public anger at those institutions and those individuals. And so when those people get unceremoniously fired or mistreated or replaced with people that have ideas that are radical, the public sees that as what they voted for. They want not just a course correction, they want retribution.
And I certainly understand and accept that those are the political realities right now.
Yeah. I mean, the same thing's happening in our THR space too. I mean, I don't have to tell you the tenor of the perspectives among ordinary vapors and small manufacturers and people in our community. It's, you and I often talk and agree about viewpoint diversity in a high-minded way, but out among the 50 states of this great country, you and I both know there is deep anger at these public officials. I mean, the opinion of the people have of Brian King, my view on it is mild compared to what most people in our world say and think about that gentleman. And you'll recall when he himself was ousted from FDA, there was, not only was there no lamentation or circumspection, people were popping confetti cannons.
Yeah, and I was not joining in the confetti cannon popping.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I do understand it, and it makes me want to just redouble the effort to fight groupthink and have more people who disagree to be talking to each other as opposed to being happy in their silos of comfort.
Yeah, I mean, we can put a bookmark on it, maybe, with what we had talked about before, which is, what the motivations versus the outcomes. And I think, if most Americans don't study categorical rhetoric, they do know that public officials, and they want public officials held accountable, and regardless of whether they're in a bubble or who they're friends with, or, how much political clout they have. And I think that's the kind of downside that folks at the conference you were just at are missing. It's not just happening in the abstract and they can't just close the doors and shut out the world. Ordinary Americans look at that kind of thing with deep antipathy, and there will be public policy consequences for that. And guess what? It might include having someone you don't like and in charge who's radical and may take drastic actions that would otherwise not occur if they had been more collegial, let's say.
Fair.
So I want to talk also, let me just pull back up our roster here. I want to talk also about another huge development this week, which is that Reynolds Tobacco, and I think Altria too, again, correct me if I'm misstating this, but at least one, if not two of those large global tobacco companies have launched their own.
Well, I think Jim McDonald did a nice job of summarizing the state of play.
That's right up I've seen. Yeah.
And so, as I understand it, there are kind of three developments. Altria Enjoy sued FDA for delay on their flavored vapes.
That's right.
Altria also announced its intention to do a test market of the On Plus nicotine pouch product,
right?
Which I guess counts as a disposable, but that's I mean, unless you reuse your pouches and add nicotine to them, probably not a common
well,
thing.
Let me just read from Jim's piece.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll put this in the thread too. Vaping 360, Jim McDonald had a comprehensive piece on this, the best of anyone who's covered it, in my opinion. And he says here, in early August, Reynolds, a division of British American Tobacco, announced it would test market flavored disposable vapes acquired from longtime independent vape company Charlie's Holdings. The new products, developed by Charlie's under the Pacha brand, will be marketed by Reynolds under the name Views One. They are currently being sold in limited locations. Reynolds claims that because Charlie's Holdings filed PMTAs for the products before the May 2022 PMTA deadline for synthetic nicotine-based products, they are legal to market while the agency reviews the application. Jim adds very dryly, that isn't true, however. It's an astonishing development because, of course, as many of our listeners will know, both of those companies have spent the last number of years on an absolute jihad against disposable products and synthetics in particular, which included lobbying, advertising, third-party activation, all kinds of what I would call, black bag PR operations with front groups and fake websites and, innuendo galore, trafficking the worst sorts of messages, the exact sort of ones that you'd see from Brian King and his pals, oh, by the way, and trashing the rest of the independent vape community, which was in and of itself despicable. But for them to now turn around and launch their own products, I don't know. It really bothers me, Joe. And it strikes me as it's just a huge missed opportunity because I've tried to persuade executives from both of those companies that it would be to their benefit, ethically and economically, to join in, at least in spirit, with the rest of the vape community in trying to reform the PMTA process and, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and the market would grow in size, and they would, because of their capabilities, would no doubt have a large part of it. And oh, guess what, you guys, you might want to try innovating. And they don't do it. Instead, they're pursuing what economists would call regulatory capture, where they urge the government to come in and put strict regulations in place so that they're the only ones that can get through the gauntlet and everyone else will face the six shooters of law enforcement. And it just makes me, again, I want to take a 5-iron to my china cabinet when I see stuff like that.
I share your frustration as someone who believes the best path forward is a regulated marketplace, ideally motivated by an abundance agenda for non-combustible nicotine alternatives for people who smoke. This doesn't feel like a step forward, and it's hard to understand it as anything but a step backward. So I
Well,
was surprised by those announcements, and I frankly hope that uh, they don't go further or ideally pull back. But they have reasons for doing what they've done, and I
well,
guess that's a piece
let's
of
put a
the
fine
puzzle.
point on it, because I want to make clear it's a nuanced point, but I think that those products are a good thing, and that they will help people quit cigarettes, and that they will expand market choice. And I am going to purchase them and use them and try them, and if I like them, I'll keep using them. So I think it's good that they're in that. My complaint is with their absolute moral nihilism, and their just boneheaded approach to both advocacy and business. It just is,
Mm,
it's wrong in 100 ways, but the products themselves, terrific. Glad to see it. Can't wait to try them.
mm. Yeah, another example where we have it's probably not, I don't know, it's not discordant views, but it's maybe parallel or slightly skew viewpoints.
Well, do you have qualms
Because,
about the products?
well, part of this is, I mean, not really. These are companies that actually take product stewardship and science very seriously. And, um, they have a history of confronting liability as a result of past actions. So that adds to my concern. But this whole notion since the 2009 Family Smoking Prevention Tobacco Control Act is that it's not the companies that decide what products are available on the market. And there's lots of things that go into the reality that 80+% of the current vape marketplace are illegal products. Um, I think uh, FDA is the proximal cause, but I think the underlying cause are all the forces that from the totem pole above them that have led to um, their behavior. But I'm clinging to the hope that the Juul authorizations from last month are the start of a cascade, and I'm gonna hold on tight to that because otherwise I'll have to admit being even more wrong than usual.
Well, New Year's is our over under on that bet. You'll
That's
recall
correct.
my chips are on no products will be approved, and yours is on lots. Um, so at any rate, it just, it's funny. I do a lot. So I've worked my whole career, Joe, with large companies just like those ones. And it's interesting, the institutional psychology. When you talk
Mm,
about groupthink, there's phenomena that happen like that. I've long seen in the corporate space. I mean, one of them, to my, immense chagrin, is that industries that get consistently and badly beaten up over time by activists in the press, like, for example, companies within the plastic space is a good example of that. Or another space where I do a lot of work is in the forest and paper space.
mm,
As you can imagine, environmental activists and legislators and there's a whole menagerie of haters of those industries. And those industries develop what I sort of call
mm,
a kind of Stockholm syndrome, where they begin to sympathize with their captors, and begin to use their language. And it's like, Patty Hearst coming out of the closet talking about, she wants to overthrow the US government. And it's very tough to get them to confront their haters and detractors. I'm trying to tell them, like, as a matter of principle, don't let these people stand between you and your customers with a threat. Like, that's commandment number one in business. But there's another phenomenon that I
mm,
see from
mm,
the tobacco space, which I wonder your view on, which is, no industry, I would venture, has been more vilified and subject to more hostility and criticism than the tobacco industry in the last, let's call it, 40 years. They've got no friends. They've got no allies. They can rely on some public officials through lobbying and public affairs who may be pro-business or have some overlap, but the public affairs is really the only leverage that they've got in the public space. And what happens is they develop an attitude that's kind of like, what to borrow a Latin phrase, contra mundum, us against the world. And they just feel like
mm.
no one else is going to help us but us, and we're going to do what's best for us. And people already hate us to the maximum degree, and there's no hope of repairing that. So why should we even try to make friends with anyone? And we're going to do what's best for our shareholders and our bottom line, and I don't know. I'm obviously coloring with a broad brush, but there's a kind of, I keep trying to persuade executives of those companies. We want to ally with you. We have common cause in the PMTA advocacy and in THR advocacy. And guess what? We're the first friends you've had of any kind in years. And we're ordinary Americans. We're, we can put a public face on this. There's so many obvious good steps forward that would help get the sunlight back on, and they just can't bring themselves to do it. I mean, I want to make an exemption for our friends at PMI, which I think is distinct from what RJR and Ultra are doing. PMI's executive leadership is not thinking about it in those terms, and they have indeed been, I think, responsible, open, willing to have dialogue, and have been in the right direction on tobacco harm reduction policy. So I'm exempting PMI, but RJR and Altria, it's just the obstinacy and insularity is just shocking.
Well, the incentives are different on those companies given their relationship to the legacy cigarette market, right? So
right, yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left, but I want to close with highlighting an incredible new Substack from your wonderful colleague, Joe, Ariel Celia.
Amen.
It is called the Celia Behavioral Science Substack. And she is putting up her analysis on, in fact, why don't I just read it? It's all about, well, why don't you tell me? She's your colleague, and I know you were one of the first subscribers. So tell us what that Substack is about.
I'd like to think I could have been the first subscriber, but early. So Ariel has a kind of fascinating training and experience background. So she brings the ability to look at a lot of these research studies and questions with a broader lens than many. She's a clear writer, an efficient writer, and I would commend people to her Substack. It includes essentially a readable version of her Michael Russell remarks from the Global Forum on Nicotine back in June. And it's just a great way to get to understand her story and where she's coming from, and then to have a deeper understanding of at least some portion of the dozens of studies that are published in this field every week. So yes, highly encourage folks to do that.
Yeah, it's been terrific. And she also talks a lot about what we're touching on, which is the motivations and the incentives that happen in the academic space around research on this subject. And I think that's so crucial. Ariel, I give her enormous credit for recognizing when that was happening in her own career earlier before she joined you guys, and saw where those walls were being put up and where the disincentives and the pressures were coming from. And she left that space for what I think are reasons of really admirable integrity. And it has, enabled her to speak in this, I think, open and far-ranging view about what's actually happening in the research community. So it's a really singular view in that sense.
Oh, agreed. I hope people take advantage of the resource.
Yeah, well, I want to do a better job of excerpting and highlighting a lot of it. I mean, it's a deep dive, and it involves a lot of rigorous analysis and data and a lot of info that may be specialized to academics, but a lot of the core messages are really sing out from the page. I mean, she and I have an ongoing joke where I take some of the things she's written and I put it into AI to be spoken in the voice of a high country Wyoming sheriff. And so I want to hope to do more of that, because of course, Joe, we have to spread the gospel, don't we?
Amen. Amen. It's got to meet people where they are at.
All right. Well, you'll be amused to know we're going to close our show, and I am going to be hustling out the door to play 18 holes at the lovely Bridge Golf Club in beautiful Bridgehampton, New York this afternoon. One of the top 20 courses.
Enjoy, Jim.
Digest.
Enjoy. That's awesome.
Here's hoping I find some birdies. And we're going to pick up again after Labor Day at our usual time, Thursdays, 11:30 a.m. And as hopefully you can tell, we're trying to improve our platform and get better at doing links in real time. So there'll be some enhancements, I'm hoping, when we turn the corner into the fall. But for now, I'm Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers. Joe Gitchell, thanks as ever for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim.
You got it. We'll talk soon.